Okay, welcome. During my investigation of Islam in the last several months, I was actually shocked to find out that Muslims believe that our Bible is corrupted. So they don't accept our Bible because they believe that the Bible has been corrupted. I will present evidence in this segment to disprove this misunderstanding. Now, our best witness to prove that the Bible has not been corrupted actually comes from the Quran. This is a Quran that I have right here, and I'm going to go with Surah chapter 5, verse 43. It may say 42 in your handouts, but I'm going to go to verse 43. So I'm going to go over Surah chapter 5, verse 43, 44, and 46. And you have the quotation there. So here's what the Quran says. Okay? But how will they come to you for judgment when they already have the Torah, which enshrines God's own judgment? This comes from the Quran. Surah chapter 5, verse 44. We have revealed the Torah. This is Allah speaking. We have revealed the Torah in which there is guidance and light. And then in Surah chapter 5, verse 46, let me read this to you. After them, we sent forth Jesus, the Son of Mary, confirming the Torah already revealed, and gave him the gospel in which there is guidance and light, corroborating what was revealed before it in the Torah, a guide and admonition to the righteous. Therefore, let those who follow the gospel judge according to what God has revealed therein. So here in the Quran, it's saying that there is guidance and light in the Torah and the gospel. Now, the Quran was written down and these revelations were given to Muhammad in the 7th century. So if this was given to him in the 7th century, then the Torah and the gospel or the Bible must not have been corrupted when he was given this revelation. So now you're going to have to prove to me when after Muhammad's time was the Bible corrupted. If it's saying that the Bible, the Torah, and the Gospel were not corrupted during this period of time, then you'll have to show me after that when it was corrupted. Here the Quran refers to the Torah and the Gospel as guidance and light. Now it would not say that about a corrupted Gospel or a corrupted Torah. Now, the following verses in the Quran also affirm that the Torah and the Gospel are not corrupted. Let me give you another verse from the Quran. Surah chapter 3, verse 3, quote, He has revealed to you the book with the truth, confirming the scriptures which preceded it. For He has already revealed the Torah and the Gospel for the guidance of men, and the distinction of right and wrong. So there is another verse in the Quran showing that the Torah and the Gospel are guidance and light. And you can actually use it for the guidance of men. Okay? So the Gospel and the Torah must not have been corrupted in the 7th century when this revelation was given to Muhammad. So you got to make the argument, if you're going to make the allegation that the Bible is corrupted, you will have to show evidence of that after the 7th century, which you're not going to be able to do. Okay, the Quran, Muslims believe the Quran is infallible. In Surah chapter 10, verse 37, here's what the Quran says about its own infallibility. Quote, This Quran could not have been devised by any but God. So if you take the Quran literally, that the Quran could not have been devised by any but God, then you must accept the previous verses that I just read to you that acknowledge that the Torah and Gospel are guidance and light. Here's just a few more verses in the Quran affirming the Bible. Surah chapter 6, verse 114 and verse 154. And also Surah chapter 2, verse 213. For time's sake, we just don't have enough time, but you can read that. Surah 2, verse 213. Okay, now, the complete Bible was translated into Latin a few hundred years before Muhammad was born. And I have that Bible with me tonight. This is called the Latin Vulgate, which this was translated several hundred years before Muhammad was born, before he was given those verses in the Quran that I read to you earlier. Okay? So the question is, how did we get the Bible? Let me briefly explain that to you. The Old Testament used by Jesus and the apostles is called the Septuagint. Okay? The Septuagint means 70. There were 70 Jewish translators in Alexandria. The Septuagint includes all 46 Old Testament books in the Catholic Bible that we accept. The King James Bible, the Reformers removed 7 Old Testament books just about 500 years ago. Okay? But the Bible Jesus quotes from in the Apostles is the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, which include all 46 Old Testament books. So the Catholic Church, we have a complete Bible. Okay? The reason why the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek is because the Jewish people at that time were scattered throughout the whole world, and this is called the dispersion. Okay? And Greek was the universal language. So the language spoken by the vast majority of Jews was Greek. So they needed a translation that they could read and understand. So this is the same Greek translation used by Christ and the apostles. Okay, Pope Damocus at the Council of Rome gave us a list of inspired books of the Bible around 386 AD. Now, prior to Pope Damocus giving the list of the 27 New Testament books, we always accepted the 46 Old Testament books. But prior to that, there were lists, but not the complete 27 New Testament canon that we have today. There were books all over, and letters and gospels and epistles throughout the world at that time. So after Pope Damocus gave us the list of the books of the Bible, 46 Old Testament, and the 27 New Testament books we have today, what he did at that time is he commissioned a saint called Saint Jerome to take all the manuscripts, both Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, and the Bibles that were in existence then, and to translate them all into Latin. And that is the translation I showed you earlier. This is the Latin Vulgate. This is the official Bible of the Catholic Church that we have today. St. Jerome was finished in 405 AD. Now, how do we know our Bible's not corrupted? Well, let me give you some historical proof. You can Google the Codex San Galenus. Codex San Galenus, okay? This is the earliest Latin Vulgate which we have today, which comes from the 5th century, which is identical with our current Latin Vulgate. So we have the Bible, the Latin Vulgate from the 5th century called the Codex San Galenus, and we have the Vulgate to compare it to. We have proof there's no corruption right here. This was translated several hundred years before Muhammad, and here's our official Bible of the Catholic Church today, the Latin Vulgate. We have it. Google it and you'll see for yourself. Okay, now shortly after Pope Damocus gave us the list of books of the Bible, and he commissioned St. Jerome to translate the Bible into Latin, the Catholic Church, the only Christian church in the world at that time, held 2 councils shortly thereafter. Okay, the first council the church held was the Council of Hippo, and that lasted a few years. And all the books of the world were gathered. Any book that were thought to have been inspired or that was claimed to be inspired were gathered up. Okay? And the church discerned those books. Okay? And then A couple years later, we had a second council to go over the first council, the Council of Carthage. Okay, that was completed in 397 AD, the Council of Carthage. Now, the Council of Carthage was under St. Augustine, one of the most brilliant scholars of all time. He's a doctor of the church. Okay? A complete investigation of all the books that existed in the world was conducted and completed at the Council of Carthage. Now, there were three categories of books in existence at the time. Okay? The first category of books are known as the acknowledged books. Okay? The acknowledged. These were acknowledged by the Eastern and Western Church as canonical. We're talking about the New Testament books. Those were the four Gospels, never in dispute, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The 13 epistles of St. Paul, and the Acts of the Apostles. Those were never in dispute. Then we had a second category of books that were investigated in the Council of Carthage. These are called the disputed books. Some of these books were read in certain churches in the world, and some were not. For example, the Epistle of Clement was thought to have been inspired and was read in certain parts of the world. There's another book called the Didache, the Teaching of the 12 Apostles, that was highly revered and was thought to be inspired. So here are the list of books that the church discerned to see which were inspired and which ones were not. These are the Epistle of James, the Epistle of Jude. You may not have that in your writing, but you can write that down. The Epistle of Peter, the second and third of John, Hebrews, and the Apocalypse of John, otherwise known as the Book of Revelation. Okay? Some books were viewed with suspicion. Some were doubted and disputed as not possessing the same authority as the first. So that's why the church held a council to investigate this. Now, some books that were thought to have been inspired but were not put into the canon were the Shepherd of Hermas, the Epistle of Barnabas, the Doctrine of the 12 Apostles, otherwise known as the Didache, the Apostolic Constitutions, the Gospel according to Hebrews, St. Paul's Epistle to the Laodiceans, and the Epistle of Clement. See, this is why we know that there's no corruption, because the church was way ahead of the game. We had councils early on and discerned this. That's how we know our Bible's not corrupted. We investigated this early on. Now, there was a third class of books. Okay? These are called spurious or false. Okay? That were never acknowledged as true and were condemned and rejected. And these include the Gospel of James, the Gospel of Thomas, Acts of Pilate, Acts of Paul, and others. After the Council of Carthage, that was ratified by Pope Innocent, right after the Council of Carthage, because in order for a council to be binding, infallible, and authoritative, it must have papal approval. So that was approved by the Catholic Church and the Pope. Okay? Guess what? The canon has never changed ever since then. We have the same Bible today, the 27 New Testament books today, and the 46 Old Testament books. That has not changed ever since. So we can thank the Catholic Church for discerning and letting us know which books were inspired and which ones are not. Now, we know of about 50 Gospels and 22 Acts that were rejected by the Catholic Church as not being inspired by God. In order for the books to be inspired or to be valid, the books of the New Testament must have apostolic origin and be free of doctrinal errors. Those are two qualifications. The Catholic Church did not create the canon. The Catholic Church simply discerned what the canon is. The Catholic Church thoroughly investigated all the books that claimed to be inspired or were thought to have been inspired by God. And the Catholic Church eliminated any of those books that you could say were corrupted or were not inspired by God. Okay? Or if they contained errors in them. These books are called apocryphal. Okay? Today we only have two categories of writings. It's either inspired or non-inspired. Inspired are the books in the Bible. Those are inspired. Anything outside of the Bible are not inspired. The canon was closed. If not for the Catholic Church, we would not have a list of inspired books of the Bible. I would ask our viewers to read this book, Where We Got the Bible, Our Debt to the Catholic Church. It's fascinating. Read it for a detailed explanation. Thank God for the desert monks that wrote, preserved the Scripture. The Catholic Church and the Christians, we were under severe persecution for the first few hundred years. Okay? The Romans wanted to destroy the Bible. They were out to look for it. So if it wasn't for the monks giving their life up to become scribes or translators or people that would continually write the Bible, okay, we would not have the Bible today. Okay, the number of books of the Bible has been closed, as I mentioned earlier. All revelation was completed by the death of the last apostle, John. That's it. There's no need for any new revelation. Jesus fulfills all prophecy and all revelation. All revelation was fulfilled and ceased at the death of the last apostle, John. Okay? Both Mormons and Muslims believe in apostasy or corruption from the faith. No apostasy and no corruption has occurred. Our faith is apostolic. It's 2,000 years old. And it's the same as handed down by the early Christians. Okay? And as apostles for the last 2,000 years. I invite anybody to read the ancient church fathers and compare what they believed and what the Catholic Church teaches today. Read St. Ignatius, read St. Justin Martyr, read St. Ignatius, okay? All the ancient, St. Polycarp, many old ancient church fathers. They also believed in the Eucharist. Both Mormons and Muslims have prophets that have similarities. Both Muslims and Mormons have prophets that claim to get a revelation from an angel. Okay? Both had private revelations. Both prophets in both these religions were also believed in polygamy. And both prophets came up with new revelations and have new books, the Book of Mormon and the Quran. So there are some similarities. Okay, the Dead Sea Scrolls, let me provide more evidence. We have evidence that there is no corruption of the Old Testament because we have the Dead Sea Scrolls. These scrolls, it's interesting, they were discovered by a shepherd by the name of Muhammad. Okay? A shepherd by the name of Muhammad, I'll get that the right way, discovered, he threw a rock in a cave to find either a goat or a sheep and heard a clanging noise, walked in there, and he found jars full of scrolls. And there was like 10 or 11 caves, numerous caves filled with the scrolls of the Old Testament. We have the proof, we have archaeological proof there's no corruption. These started between, I believe, 250 BC and 68 AD. That's when these were written. 200 BC and 68 AD. And these can be viewed in Jerusalem. You can view them for yourself. You can Google the Dead Sea Scrolls. When compared with our current Old Testament and the Torah? There is no corruption. We have proof that it's baseless, that the Bible has been corrupted. We have archaeological and historical proof. The Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of over 800 manuscripts, and these fragments, like I mentioned, were discovered in 1947 in Palestine, near the Dead Sea, in caves. These texts are more than 2,000 years old and much older than the Quran. Okay? The Bible used in Muhammad's time is the same Bible the Catholic Church has today. Our official Bible is the Vulgate. It's the same Bible. Okay? St. Jerome, as I mentioned earlier, translated the original Hebrew text, which is called the Tanakh, and the Greek Septuagint of the Old Testament into Latin, as well as the New Testament. And like I mentioned earlier, this is called the Latin Vulgate Bible. One thing I want to show you is, this is called the Douay-Rheims Bible. Okay? This is the first English translation that the Catholic Church approved. This is a word-for-word translation of the Vulgate. Okay? This translation into English, word for word, was translated into English in 1752 by the Roman Catholic Bishop Richard Challoner. The translation of the Douay-Rheims Bible is considered to be the most authentic translation of the Latin Vulgate Bible. This Bible should be in every Catholic, Christian, and Muslim household for reference. Now, even though there are different word choices in modern English translations, okay, the Church has allowed new translations of English. Okay? There's been no change in any doctrine in any Bible that has been approved by the Catholic Church that is translated into English. I'm going to show you, in fact, that there are different translations of the Quran in Arabic. When I discovered this, I was absolutely shocked because I believed, as most Muslims do, that the Quran is completely uncorrupted and that there's only one uncorrupted Quran worldwide. And through my research, I was able to find at least 5 Arabic translations of the Quran. But for the sake of tonight's discussion and this segment, I am going to show you 2 Arabic versions of the Quran. And you may have this packet, okay? But I will just show you briefly some of these differences. We have the most commonly used Quran. This is called the Hafs. And the other Quran is the Warsh. The Warsh is used in parts of Africa and a couple other parts of the world. Okay? The first thing is that the verse numbers are different in both of these Arabic translations. They're not identical. Okay? We have slightly different words in each different translation in the Quran. Okay? I'll show you some of these examples. In Surah chapter 2, verse 132, in the Hafs Quran, the English translation is, "And Abraham enjoined," and in the Warsh it says, "And Abraham instructed." And you can see that right there in Arabic. So you don't think it's just English? There's the the Arabic translation right there. And the verse numbers are slightly different. In the Hafs Quran, in Surah chapter 3, verse 133, there's an extra word. In the Hafs Quran, it says, "and hasten to." In the Warsh, it says, "hasten to." So there's extra word. In Surah chapter 3, verse 133, in the Hafs Quran, if you compare that with the Warsh Quran. Okay? We have 2 different Arabic dialects in the Hafs Quran and the Warsh Quran. Even though the dialects are different, the words are different, they do have the same meaning. In the Hafs Quran, it says yartada, and then in the Warsh, it says yartadid. Okay? Slightly different Arabic right there, that you can see the difference in the Arabic if you want to look at it. Okay? I'll give you a couple more examples. In the Hafs Quran, in Surah chapter 2, verse 259, it says, we shall raise up. In the Warsh, in Surah chapter 2, verse 258, Surah 258, we shall revive, make alive. So raise up in the Hafs, revive, make alive. Slightly different translations. Okay? Slightly different meaning. In the Hafs, in Surah chapter 3, verse 81, it says, I gave you. But in the Warsh, it says, we gave you. So you have a singular God speaking singularly, I, in the Hafs, and in the Warsh, it says, we gave you. So two different Arabic words, okay? There's different letters, okay, in the middle of these words in Arabic, okay? Which makes the word slightly different in these two different translations, okay? And then in another verse in the Quran, in Surah chapter 4, verse 152, it says, he gives them, but in the Warsh, it says, we give them. So hopefully you can see that right there. He or we. Here's a big difference, though, in the Hafs and the Warsh. In Surah 1, verse 4, in the Hafs, it says, owner of the day. But in the Warsh, it says, king of the day. So you have owner in the Hafs, and in the Warsh you have king. So the point I'm trying to make, if you're going to allege that our Bible is corrupted because there are different English translations of our Bible, we could make the same point or objection by showing you that there are different Arabic translations of the Quran. Okay? Let me present more evidence tonight to show further proof that the Bible is not corrupted. We have two ancient copies of the Bible. This one is in Greek. This is called the Codex Vaticanus, okay? Codex Vaticanus. Here's a picture of just part of it right there. The Codex Vaticanus is perhaps the most important of all the manuscripts of Holy Scripture. The Codex Vaticanus is the oldest copy of the Greek scriptures in existence. And guess where the Codex Vaticanus is kept? In the Vatican. Okay? And the Codex Vaticanus can be traced to the 4th century. We have it. We can compare the Codex Vaticanus with our Bible today. We know it's not corrupted because we have copies to compare it to. We have the evidence to prove the Bible is not corrupted. Also, another ancient translation was found it was discovered in a convent at the foot of Mount Sinai, and this is called the Codex Sinaiticus. Okay? You can Google Codex Sinaiticus. This is kept in the British Library. Okay? We have over 5,000 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament available today. We have over 10,000 Latin manuscripts available as well. We have the complete New Testament in Latin available in manuscripts. We have over 8,000 Coptic and Syriac manuscripts as well. We can even compare our Bible with Coptic and Syriac manuscripts. So the evidence is overwhelming that our Bible has not been corrupted. Now, the Quran tells Muhammad in Surah chapter 10, verse 92, let me give you this quote from the Quran. Quote, if you doubt, this is God talking to Muhammad, if you doubt what we have revealed to you, ask those who have read the scriptures before you. Now, why would Allah tell Muhammad to consult those that have read the scriptures before you if the scriptures were corrupted? Allah would not tell Muhammad to consult those who have read corrupted scriptures. No, go consult those who have read the scriptures before you because they weren't corrupted when these revelations were given to Muhammad. The Dead Sea Scrolls confirm that the Old Testament is the same today as it was 2,000 years ago. No corruption. The question is, where is the proof of corruption? Furnish the proof. Who did the corrupting? If you're going to allege the Bible was corrupted, who did it? Okay? Why is there no record of any resistance to the Bible or the Torah or the Gospel and the Torah being corrupted? Don't you think some people would have laid down their lives if somebody tried to go into a monk and take his perfect Bible and give him a corrupted one instead? He would have died before that happened. There would have been an outcry in the world. The Jews would have outcried if you tried to take their Torah from them and switched it with the corrupted Torah. And also all the early Christians would have done the same. Now, there's no collusion between the Jews and Christians. How could they collude to allow their Torah and the gospel to be corrupted? Because they were opposed to one another at that time. Okay, they weren't in agreement. They weren't in collusion. So one side would have said something if someone would have came and taken all the Torahs and all the Gospels and switched them with corrupted ones. Now ask yourself a question. We're in the ancient world. How could somebody possibly go to every part in the world, find every Torah and every Bible, every Gospel, and switch every single one of them with corrupted copies with no historical record? It's impossible. There's no internet back then. Okay? You'd be lucky to find a handful, especially when the Christians are hiding it from you trying to take it from them. Okay? So, we have thousands of ancient manuscripts, from fragments to entire texts, that have been discovered throughout the world, all substantially agreeing with what we have today. Okay? The false allegation of the Bible being corrupted has no basis in historical fact. It's a complete fabrication. It's a myth with no proof. Our proof, which I presented you tonight, is the Dead Sea Scrolls. I showed you the Codex San Galenus, okay, the ancient 5th century Latin Vulgate. I showed you the current Vulgate. I showed you the Codex Vaticanus. I showed you the Codex Sinaiticus. Okay? We also have 10,000 Latin manuscripts available for scholars to view. We have over 8,000 Coptic and Syriac manuscripts of the New Testament as well. So I guess what I'm saying to our viewers, if you are not a Christian and you want to find out more about who Jesus is, to read the gospel as soon as possible. Read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Get the truth about Jesus Christ. Remember what the Quran tells you in Surah chapter 5, verse 43, 44, and 46, that there is guidance and light in the gospel and the Torah. We invite you to read the Bible. We invite you to come to the Catholic Church. Praise be to God and peace be with you. Thank you.